Okay, you guys, let's go ahead and come together again, please. If you're out in the lobby and you can hear my voice, let's please get started again. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. The others will join us in a second from the lobby. As you all well know, licensing is a critical issue with respect to workforce development. So we're so fortunate to be able to convene representatives from 4 of the mental and behavioral health licensing boards, and actually 5 if you count that one of the board is dual representation. And so what we would like to do is go into a discussion with the panel. We have some questions that we have put together, and these questions have come from our planning committee, and the planning committee has been working on these questions since spring. Also, we've tried to consolidate many of the questions that you all gave to us at the time of your registration. You might recall when you registered through Constant Contact, you were asked to provide information about what you were hoping to get from the session and questions that you have for the panelists. So pretty much in keeping with our format that we used this morning, we will start off with those questions to the panelists, and then we will open up for Q&A from this audience and take questions from our remote sites as well. So I've asked that the panelists give an introduction, just a little bit about their background, the discipline that they represent, and to share with us other pertinent information about their role on the licensing board. Starting with Dr. Paul. Okay.
Okay, so I'm sorry, what were you wanting?
Just
the bright lights were getting
okay.
me.
Just your affiliation, your background, the role that you play, just a general introduction.
Myself.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Hi, I'm Michelle Paul. I am a clinical psychologist. I'm the new president of the Board of Psychological Examiners. A little by way of background, I also want to mention that I've worn, in Nevada you get to wear lots of hats because we're a small state, and you get to be a big fish in a small pond. And I'm not that I'm that big of a fish, but I've served as the president of the Psychological Association for 2 terms, and on a variety of committees related to the Psychological Association. I'm also the associate director of the UNLV APA accredited program in psychology, and I'm also the director of a mental health training clinic at UNLV.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Kim Frakes, and I'm the executive director for the Board of Examiners for Social Workers. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker. Pretty much ran the gamut as far as what social workers need to do in the state of Nevada. I've graduated from UNR back in 1998 and immediately got a job with DCFS out in the rural communities. And then came back into Reno to do my clinical internship. I've been at West Hills and Willow Springs. And I've also run a geropsychiatric unit up in northern Nevada. And I ended up over at the board doing macro level social work. And I think my perspective has been helpful in my work. I'm kind of unique also because I'm an actual board staff member, and we have board members, and their insights and participation is very helpful. I'm the one that gets to be in the foxhole day in and day out, and so they decided to let me out today, providing I'm on my best behavior and to come and to participate in the discussion. So thank you for having me. Oops, okay.
Hello, everybody. Is this on? Mm-hmm. Good afternoon. I'm surprised we still have so many people who are here. Somebody said this would be a popular topic. I don't know if it's a popular topic or an interesting topic, but it's a delight to be here. My name is Eric Schoen. I currently serve as the new president of the Board of Examiners for Marriage and Family Therapists and Clinical Professional Counselors, which if you can say that 5 times fast, I'll buy you a beer after the meeting. Yeah, true. Okay, I'll buy you a soda. There you go. In terms of my background, I've been a clinician for over 20 years. I'm currently the deputy director at a nonprofit in Story County called Community Chest, also the executive director of a dynamic collaborative of health and human service organizations from throughout Truckee Meadows and the rurals, and we have a Las Vegas member called the Human Services Network. I also teach at University of Nevada, Reno in their addictions program, so I appreciate your comment. And I am also a supervisor of interns up and coming. So I too think wearing many hats is what we do in Nevada. And sometimes you don't get to choose when you serve, you just have to say, yes, I'll serve. So it's a delight to be with you here this afternoon.
I'm Darlene Dufault, and I'm the president of the Board of Examiners for Alcohol, Drug Abuse, and Gambling Counselors. I think I'm kind of unique because I'm the only non-clinical president of a behavioral health board, I think, here in the state of Nevada. I'm an MBA, so I have a different perspective, I think, on a lot of things. But I think you know that the governor is looking at having non-clinicians as board presidents, sorry, but he's looking at that. Because he wants to get a global perspective, so that's why I've been the executive director, and now I'm the state director for Choices Group in Maple Star, Nevada, here in the state of Nevada. This will tell you how old I am. Under the Clinton administration, I started the first drug court treatment program in the state of Nevada, the third in the nation, and served on his advisory board for drug court and specialty court programs nationally. And I've been I'm not a clinician. I've been administrating behavioral health programs here in the state of Nevada for 25 years.
Very good. Thank you so much. We welcome our panelists. So the first question is kind of a three-part question, and it concerns workforce development broadly. Of course, licensing is a critical part to workforce development in terms of assuring the adequacy and the supply of clinicians that serve the clients in need. We wanted to first have your thoughts on the question about what role you think the boards, and you can each respond respective to your particular board, what role do you think that the board should play in workforce development? Second part of that, please clear up what you think might be some of the common misconceptions about what the boards do or should do. And then finally, share with us if there's any initiatives that you all are working on with respect to workforce development. So again, what role do you think that your board should play in workforce development? Please address any common misconceptions you think there are about the board. And then what might be some of the solutions or initiatives that the boards can work on? And we want to start off with Dr. Paul. Okay.
So I prepared a tome in response to these questions in advance. Never give me questions in advance, because I'll prepare. So I'll try not to be a microphone hog. But it's a big question to unpack. So first of all, I think with regard to what role the board should play in workforce development is to ensure that qualified professionals get licensed as quickly and easily as possible and are received with welcoming and open arms. How that then breaks down and what that looks like, I think breaking that down means communicating effectively with training programs, communicating effectively with the profession, the professional associations, communicating effectively with our national developments and workforce development trends at the national association level, and really also to be a resource for high quality data for our state, so that the state understands where our workforce stands. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that, for me, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that the board is actively working to not license people, and that we're motivated by our private interests, and that we're not motivated by our protection of the public interests. In terms of initiatives, we have a number of initiatives, and I'd be happy to speak on any one of them. So I'll just touch on each one so that I can pass the microphone along. We have mobility initiatives, such as the new Psy Compact that Assemblyman Oscarson mentioned. That was something that we brought to the Healthcare Committee. When there was an internship shortage for psychologists, we worked very closely with the Psychological Association and the Medicaid office to make sure that we could nimbly and flexibly rewrite our code so that we could register interns so that they could be considered MQHPs. In terms of examination, we've increased the frequency. It used to be that you had to wait 6 months to get your state exam completed, and it was offered once in the north and then once in the south. And if you missed your chance, you had to wait 6 months or potentially 8 months before the next available, or 9 months or 10 months or 11 months before the next available slot was open. Now we offer the exam every other month for a full week during that time period, and simultaneously north and south. We worked very closely with the BCBA licensure and credentialing, and our language is now a national model. And generally speaking, if people want to come to the board with ideas for how to for accommodations with regard to getting licensed or getting supervision adjustments made, we are more than happy to work flexibly when people come to the board with a request. So for example, somebody who wants to work in the rurals but their supervisor is somewhere else, how can we approve supervision even though the supervisor isn't at the rural site the required 50% of the time or 100% of the time, depending on which level of training you're at. So we've worked to provide accommodations that way. Okay, that's enough.
Thank you. Let me see. For the social work board, what is your role do we play? I call it the 3 R's. It's responsible, responsive, and reliable licensure for eligible candidates as it relates to public protection. Some of the biggest misconceptions, I kind of think sometimes that folks kind of, especially people that aren't licensed professionals, and at one point in time in my life I fell under that. It's sort of like the DMV approach. You just kind of go in, you take an exam, you need to have a picture taken and get your license right then and there. What's the holdup type of thing? And the fact that our board's mission is to protect the public. I'm going to kind of date myself by saying that my predecessor, Rose Tuana, was the one that actually coined the phrase, the mission of our board is to protect the public from social workers. We're not here for the development, but again, who would want to work in a profession where we had to be ashamed of our profession because there were so many either ill-equipped or illegal or unethical or incompetent individuals out there. So that, I think we all share as our common goal is the protection of the public because it better promotes our profession. Oh, do you want the third? Sorry. The third one, initiatives, sorry. We have actually made some pretty interesting progress as far as some initiatives that we've instituted lately. One is in a temporary regulation, which we hope to have adopted by the board in a couple of weeks, is the 1-year provisional license for eligible applicants applying for endorsement, where they can readily get sort of the initial thing going, and then we have that remaining year for them to provide all the other things. But during that 1-year period, they can go ahead and start to work with some, certain qualifying verifiers in place, which can be done electronically, and the rest of the items can come within that 1-year period. We've authorized third-party authorization forms. This was very helpful for the University of Utah as far as doing telemedicine into our communities in the rural regions. When we did raise the fees to the maximum allowable in 2015, it did give us some income to hire an investigator and a per diem internship program coordinator. So hope the people that are in internships or supervisors are starting to see their reports and statements come back on a more timely basis. And the other thing I wanted to correct, I think it was Dr. Beck, we do, and I know information changes so quickly, that we did recently adopt regulations now that a certain percentage of postgraduate hours can now be conducted by either a licensed psychologist or a psychiatrist. Yes, so thank you.
Okay, so in terms of workforce development, when I was preparing for this question, I came up with 8 essential, I think, precepts. 1 is to be transparent as a board. 2 is to be open. 3 is to be predictable. 4 is to be inclusive. 5 is to be responsive. 6 is to be timely. 7 is to be fair, and 8 is to be just. I mean, speaking to what the two of you said, we do have a responsibility to protect the public, but we also have a responsibility to make the road as easy as possible for our licensees, because we need as many people out there serving Nevadans as possible, and we want to minimize the degree to which we're providing an administrative burden. We want to minimize that administrative burden. In terms of, I think, misconceptions about boards, I think there is a misconception that we're more powerful than we are. And I want to draw your attention to at least NRS 641A. We only have 5 general powers that are given to us by the legislature. 1 is to examine and pass upon the qualifications of the applicants for licensing. So when somebody puts in an application, we can review that and determine whether or not that meets the qualifications. And then we can 2, license those qualified applicants. 3, revoke or suspend licenses. 4, establish requirements for continuing ed. And 5, collect all fees and make disbursements pursuant to this chapter. That's it. That's all we're allowed to do. And some people think that we should be able to provide other interpretations for new things or guidance on things like telehealth. And we have been given actual guidance that we can't do that. That starts to move into the rulemaking process that is the domain of the legislature. And the most recent case law that I'm familiar with is the Dental Examiners of North Carolina case, where indeed that board started to provide some opinions and some guidance, and it was determined to have overstepped its bounds. And so we have to be really careful that if it's not in our NRS or our NAC, we, unfortunately, as much as we might like to, can't provide the guidance that I, as a practitioner, would love to have. Finally, in terms of initiatives and progress, really trying to return to the customer service roots. So every time we have a meeting, having a physical meeting location in both the north and the south. 2, trying to make sure that monthly meetings are regular and predictable so that we can encourage attendance by licensees and by the public. Reaching out to associations and colleagues to let them know that we want their participation and input, and being personable, humble with licensees and their supervisors. What I hope is that we can create sort of this positive flow through, so that when students who get to know their boards and licensees get to know their boards, the whole process is demystified. Excuse me. There's a better understanding of what we can do. They look at serving on the board as part of aspirational service, and we can have hopefully this rising sea of great aspirational care and practice. That's my hope for the life of the board, and that'll ensure that we on these different boards have good representation far into the future.
I think it's important to make the workforce accessible to the process of becoming licensed. It's important for the board to support their efforts, make trainings and CEUs available to them so that they can meet the requirements to become licensed in the state of Nevada. We have worked hard in changing the licensing process, and we've also worked hard, and I think I'll talk about this under C, how we've raised the bar in my board in the state of Nevada. I think for what do we find are the misconceptions? One is, I think sometimes we appear to be punitive. And I can tell you that we're only punitive when we have to be punitive for public safety. There's a lot of situations that come before the board that are pretty concerning. And so we have to address those issues simply for public safety, for the safety of the consumers. The consumers have the right to the best treatment possible. And so if we are not ensuring that the individuals that are working with them are ethical, moral, and experienced and educated, then we're not providing the services that are needed to the people that need them the most, and we're doing more harm. We've made so much progress, and I am so proud of our board. 20 years ago, you could have a high school education, be clean and sober for a year, and get a license. I'm not a clinician. Like I said, I'm an MBA, so I had no experience in counseling, but I came into the behavioral health and in administration, and I was told, you can get a license and you can treat clients. And I said, well, I'm not really qualified, I don't think. What would happen if I really had to treat someone? And so what we have done over the years is we've changed the requirements. The requirements are now you must have a bachelor's degree in order to become an intern or a master's degree to become a licensed counselor. We have started several years ago to license people as an LCADC, which includes the mental health component for co-occurring disorders. We found that there was such a fine line between substance abuse, obviously, and co-occurring, and that when individuals, substance abuse counselors, were treating clients that exhibited co-occurring behaviors, they didn't have the experience or the education to treat those issues. So we started that licensure several years ago. The requirement is that they have, and I don't remember how many hours of mental health license or education and internship in order to provide those services. And their scope of practice is limited to the co-occurring disorders. They can't treat psychotics, they can't do any of those things, but they can treat the co-occurring disorders. We also have implemented online application, online processing, and one of the best things that I really like is that license verification is online, which includes any disciplinary action. We also report to the National Clearinghouse for Substance Abuse Counselors of any disciplinary action that happens in the state of Nevada, because we don't want them to be going to other states and treating other people if there's some kind of an issue in their behaviors with a client. So we have, what I can say is what our board has done is we have completely raised the bar to make it a professional profession by requiring education and the CEUs required.
Thank you for explaining a bit more about the scope of practice. And I'm sure as we go on with the other questions and the audience chimes in, they'll want to have you elaborate a little bit more. But we want to transition then to another topic about merging the licensing boards. As we heard this morning from Assemblyman Oscarson, that's one of the issues that has been proposed, one of the things that will be examined. And we wanted to kind of get your perspective, first just about the rationale for such an initiative. Some of people have raised the question that, is this being driven by our need to want to integrate care? Is it coming from a theoretical perspective? If it's not coming from that place, where is this recommendation coming from? And then to what extent have you all as board representatives had some say in that planning? And so we want to first start off then, what might be some of the pros and cons for this mega board, for merging these boards? So what are some of the positives from that? But then what might be some of the challenges that could result? And anyone can address this one. It's not directed at any particular person.
These microphones are funky because you have to talk into them in order for you to get heard. So it may be difficult to have a conversation, but we can talk loud and maybe try not to cut each other off. But so when I was thinking about the pros, here at UNLV, I use this as an example because we did something like that. We created a partnership across a couple of colleges, across several training departments, to consolidate resources, to pool resources, to create a better mental health training clinic than we had before, which was sort of smaller attempts across departments in our various silos, trying to train our students. And now we have a larger clinic. And so pooling those resources did cut down on some overlapping expenses. And so I can see there being opportunity for the licensing boards to potentially pool resources to share in overlapping expenses. Particularly, I think one of our challenges is clerical. The amount I could speak to what I think are obstacles to licensing on our board, and I would imagine we have some shared headaches around that. What does take so long? There are some legitimate things that should take a long time because we care about licensing quality providers, not just warm bodies, as you mentioned earlier. But there are some things that are that we're frustrated with too, that take so long, that maybe if we pooled resources, we could make better for all of us combined. So that's where I think some of the potential pros come from. What about you guys?
I just wanted to talk a little bit, and this is probably not a pro, but I look at the vetting process that we go through with applicants, and public safety has got to be number one because of the type of work that these individuals are doing and the people that they're impacting. Things are getting worse in our society rather than better, and there are so many disorders and so many diagnoses that one person may have that it takes a very trained, educated professional to figure it all out for them. And again, we owe them the best treatment possible. That's got to be one of our number one goals, is we're here to serve the people who need us. And my concern is that it will become robotic and that we will not have the vetting process that we have right now. There's a lot of applications we reject for so many reasons, good, valid reasons, and there's a lot of disciplinary action that has to happen to protect. And my concern is that may not happen. I'm not so concerned about the actual process of licensing, the stamping the certificate, and that's great. I would love someone to take that over. What I'm concerned with is the amount of disciplinary action that we see, that honestly, sometimes I drive home thinking, I can't believe a professional would do this. Thank goodness we're able to stop them. That's my concern. From a public, we have to, if we become too robotic, I don't think those things will be addressed, and that will only hurt the great need that we have in the state of Nevada for these services. That's just my opinion.
I want to also dovetail on what Michelle and Darlene also said about, pooling resources would be phenomenal. And maybe even trying to, in some way update our database and our IT might be helpful doing that as well. I do have concerns about becoming too automated, and I know that was mentioned during the most recent Legislative Healthcare Committee, was to replace all of us with just 3 clerks because everything would be automated and one person to oversee. I don't know. I'd like to know what the rationale is. I know some of it comes from what Eric had talked about, the North Carolina Dental Board versus the FTC. Instead of spending a lot of time discussing it, I think you could go online and look it up. But it also talks about how their board, which their members are elected by their own licensees. So it'd be like for us, NASW, nominating the board versus all of our board members are appointed by the governor. None of us elect our own board members. So there's, it'd be kind of interesting to hear what that's about. I would also like to see, I'm like to keep an open mind. I want to know what is being proposed instead. Is it just something that's just going to be hacked together and put together, and then we'll kind of work it out? Or is this something maybe, understandably, with our board, I'll say that, there's things that could always stand improvement. Perhaps maybe just some finessing with a surgical knife and a little bit of this, that, and the other versus a hack job might be the route to go. The other thing is, I don't think we've ever had what they call a sunset review, where somebody actually comes and sits in and observes your office for 2 or 3 days, see exactly what it is you do. Because again, if it's sort of this sort of DMV approach that, people pass exams and we're supposed to just give them their license, there's more to it than that. I was just kind of making a summary of just the things in my own capacity I did yesterday. Had a talk at length with a new applicant with a criminal history that was very concerned about applying. Should I apply? Should I not apply? Somebody from the public had called because he has a child custody issue and he's angry with his social worker and doesn't feel he's being heard, and he's very limited on resources. I had individual continuing education courses. To date, we don't charge to review continuing ed courses, and we like to be respectful of the robustness and the variety that our social workers have in the field as far as their area of interest. I don't know what would happen with that. We probably would not be able to do individual CEUs anymore. I'm not sure. Then I also get ethical dilemmas. I almost feel like I'm the Ann Landers of social work, What would you do type of thing. And so I have to tell them we don't offer legal advice because I'm not an attorney. Never played one on TV. But, we can offer you some guidance. And, I think this is, again, where sort of my expertise is, as far as being in the field and the variety of arenas of social work has been very beneficial. And they usually, I think, are pretty happy. They may not like the answer I give, but I think they at least feel pretty confident that I gave a pretty competent answer.
So, our board's position, we had a meeting a month ago and we talked about this expanded board concept. And we're not formally taking a position on whether this proposal should go forward. I don't think that's our role. But we definitely understand the frustrations that led to this being proposed. And we understand, too, some of the strategic thinking behind this, that maybe there are some efficiencies, not only cost efficiencies, but hopefully maybe it could help with integrated care at the same time. So on the pro side, we definitely understand why that would seem to be an attractive option. And we understand the frustrations because as licensees, many of us on the board have experienced those same frustrations. And so we're very sensitive to those and trying to do our best to get in front of those. In terms of whether it's a good idea or not, I don't know. I mean, I think every possible form of human organization, whether it's a for-profit entity like Enron, or if it's a nonprofit, or if it's a government agency, they all can do well and they can all fail miserably. It all depends on the leadership and the people on the ground, whether or not you have ethically driven leadership or people are trying to take shortcuts. One of my concerns if we go to a super board is that we will lose some of the intellectual capital that's currently on these different boards, some of the institutional history for why decisions were made and how they came about, and that helps to provide context for ensuring that everybody's treated equally and fairly. And I don't know that we would see those efficiencies that are hoped for. A lot of the work that's done is to move a piece of paper, is to have a conversation, and you really can't have 3 conversations at once. So I don't know how much we would actually have in terms of efficiencies, but I definitely understand the attraction to the idea.
And I think you all have articulated some of the concerns beautifully here, and I'm wondering to what extent have you had the opportunity to share these concerns, either the pros or the cons, with the decision makers? Have you gotten feedback from licensees, and are you compiling that feedback along with your own perspective? Are you giving feedback to them?
So I'll just speak really quickly. I understand where some of the feedback came from because it came from some of my interns speaking to the Interim Finance Healthcare Committee about their frustrations with the system, and I am glad. I totally understand why the Interim Healthcare Committee would make a recommendation. As far as including the board around this proposal, we weren't aware of this proposal until just about a month ago when a representative from the Department of Health and Human Services reached out to me personally and said, "Hey, by the way, this is coming down the pipeline. What's your thoughts on this?" I'm like, "I don't know. I have first thing I've heard about it." So I think all of us are to a certain degree playing catch up on this and trying to become an active part of the process.
Okay.
We were not consulted or anything. We have reached out as a board to offer some insight into some of the concerns as well as some of the pros. I think you're right. For financial reasons, this may be a very good thing. But as far as the licensing and the day-to-day operations of licensing and supporting the treatment community, I don't know. But I was not invited to any discussion. I don't know about the rest of you.
We weren't invited either. And it came as somewhat of a surprise because our board, I'm equally proud of the work we've done. We've been steadily chipping away at this problem for several years. I think that's another misconception. Not only do we have less power than people think we have, but the process for even us to make a change that people would like us to make, we can say in a board meeting, let's do it. And that let's do it moment can take a year to a year and a half to get implemented, not because we're not doing the work we need to do, but just because it's the way things are done. The democratic process doesn't always go quickly, so there's public workshops, that have to be noticed, and people have to be allowed to have public comment, and then you have to send your changes into the Legislative Council Bureau for them to put their legalese onto it and then bring it back, and then they don't always interpret it in the way that it was intended, so then you have to fix it, and then it goes back, right? So there's this back and forth process. So
all of our regulations are in the NRS, which means if you want to make a change, you have to wait for the legislature
well, right.
to meet every
Right.
2 years.
There's so it depends.
And approve
Yeah. So we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but right, there's the NRS, which exactly that's a legislative process. You can't change it. Right. 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 But even if you want to change your NAC,
Right.
that's happened. So it looks like maybe we've been moving very, very slowly, but we actually have been really chipping away at this for a long time. And so when this came, it really surprised us, and we felt a little blindsided by it.
And then there's one other piece to add to this, and that is we as a board do not have the authority to raise the fees. So right now, I think it's $150 to renew a license or something in that neighborhood. That's been that same fee for 10, 20, 30 years. I don't know when that was first set and then last revised. But if you can imagine trying to make a household work on a budget from on an income from 20 years ago in today's dollars, our purchasing power for being able to afford the staff and the resources to make this an effective, quick process has been hampered by the ability to raise those fees. Not that we want to stick it to the licensees, but there's a compromise between having enough revenue to make sure you can run your office well and making sure that you make it as affordable as you can for your licensees. So that's another challenge, which also makes me wonder whether or not the efficiencies would be there, because we're doing a lot of this work, and I think I'm equally proud of our board too, in terms of where we're going. We've been doing a lot with a little, and I don't know if that would be the case. I know that, when things are taken into the state, there's oftentimes a large administrative cost that goes along with that. So I don't know how much of that would be counterbalanced to that degree.
And I would just like to go ahead and say ditto to everything, that it is a very lengthy process. And that, the existence of our personal board, the social work board, since 1989, we've always worked with the legislators, whether it was with our NRS or our NACs. So there's nothing in there that should be a surprise to anyone. A lot of the things were modified based on their recommendations or their basic input saying this is the way it's going to pass. So again, as far as knowing that this was coming down the pike, at least for us, we were attending the Legislative Committee on Healthcare quite frequently due to the Senate Bill 515. And so again, there was that frustration where we had done certain things and met certain things, and the committee was frustrated as well because it just didn't match. And so, I do believe that there's room for a lot of discussion, and but again, ditto to the fact that we have board members volunteering almost all the time to do things for us, and I don't know if that's going to happen if it's automated and that sort of thing. It'll be very interesting. I look forward, at least during the session, to having a very robust discussion and having a lot of exchange of ideas. This is the first time I think the three of us have ever sat down and met.
Right. It's fun. You guys are nice people. How about that? I want to bring up another piece, getting back to that question about integrate. Is this an extension of embracing integrated care? I don't think so, actually. But I could see where somebody might want to think about it that way. And while I do think there's incredible benefit in getting to know each other better and working collaboratively and putting our heads together, I've already heard, like you were saying, we have an online application process, and I was thinking, oh yeah, we do that, we do that too. But there may be some things that we do that we could share ideas. And that's what you do when you get on an integrated care team. You sit together at the table and you come from your different perspective, but you still maintain your integrity as the professional that you are when you're on an integrated care team. And I think that maintaining, I worry that this particular structure, the way it's been proposed, and it could change, puts one representative from each board, and I'm not sure that the integrity of each of the professions will be maintained through one representative on this bigger board. Each of our professions, that's I think another misconception about all of our professions, we're very diverse, even within our profession. And I know that can be confusing to the public, and for that, I'm frustrated on behalf of the public. But there are child psychologists, there are adult psychologists, there are forensic psychologists, there are neuropsychologists, and each of them has their slightly different scope of practice and their slightly different professional issues that come up. And I'm not sure that any one psychologist could represent an entire profession of psychologists in the state on a board like this, and I would imagine the same would be true. So when you said institutionalized knowledge, the fact that a complaint can come to the board, and I think this is another misconception, but you said we try not to be punitive if we don't have to be. We understand that people make mistakes, and when there are several psychologists sitting around the table listening to a particular complaint, if I don't know something about custody, for example, I'm going to defer to the expertise of my colleague who does. And I think we come to a much fairer decision when there are several of us sitting there representing, of course, protecting the public, but also ultimately educating that professional on how we're going to get them remediated or get them working appropriately. So I worry about that.
Another thing that I worry about is the educational component. Because we're in the field, we're up on the latest, greatest evidence-based practices, everything that's coming down the pike. You can't be doing treatment like the way we did 20 years ago. You have to be up on all the latest and greatest, and we set the standards for our licensees. We share information with them. We bring trainings to them. We provide resources for CEUs. When anything comes up and you need to find out about it, you can call the board and say, what do you think of this new treatment modality? Do you have anything? And I don't know that that's going to be available, so I wonder if that's going to set treatment back, because we'll be doing these things the same way all the time and we won't be apprised, because we're all at these great healthcare meetings and all these great conferences where they're talking about, I remember when motivational interviewing was like, what's that? Now this is standard. But we make it standard. We make the assessment tools standard. Because we find out which ones are the best. They're evidence-based, they're researched. So I'm concerned about the education component. I think that will be lost.
Okay, and we're going to need to transition to the audience. Time goes by so quickly. We didn't get to the reciprocity question, but that question may come up from an audience member. But we're going to go ahead and kind of float the microphones around the room so that the audience can get in on the discussion.
Hi, Ultimate Lewis, LPC in various states, and I also work for Mayor Group. So I just want to apologize first. I don't mean to be critical, but a couple of things. As I work with a Mayor Group, our competitor is HPN. We sometimes have conversations with our competitors to see what's going on. What are you doing? How are you helping the public? And I think it's a sad case that this is the first time you guys have ever been together. Like, that's not cool. Okay, so number two, sorry, I'm gonna hurry up. I think when I was getting educated at UNLV to become a counselor in the MFT program, I didn't know a lot of things. And once I graduated and I saw that social workers had all of this access and not me, it was like we were rivals, Bloods and Crips. I've got all this clinical education, maybe you do too, but you can do all of these things that I can't. So as we talk about integration, I would like to know, what is the board doing in regards to advocating? Because I think we are peers, I think we are the same, but yet the federal government sees differently, sometimes local government sees differently. So why are we not partnering and figuring out how we can help your licensees? And number two, apparently we think you are this big bad wolf, and you're saying, hey, we're not. So then that tells me there's no transparency. We don't see where you're limited. We don't see what you can and can't do. And so it feels like a closed door. It feels like you guys are behind this curtain and we think you can do this, but you're saying we really can't. And I think there needs to be more collaboration with those that are licensed and the board.
I think that I really hear what you're saying, and I take it to heart that it's so easy to get busy with our day-to-day, right? There's nobody in this room that isn't stretched thin. If somebody's in this room that has time, extra time, as a mental and behavioral health provider in the state of Nevada, I'd like to know your secret. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't get together. You are totally right. And I'm the first person to say I want to do this more often. And I think maybe one solution, potential solution, is could we have some hybrid compromise where maybe we don't do this kind of a board, but that's proposed, but that twice a year, these boards get together and have a consortium or something that consults. But I want to say that, professions have contracts with society. Society says you get to be a profession that has expertise, and in return, we'll let you self-govern as a profession. And if we let the public down, that's on us. And that's why right now people are wondering, what the heck are you doing? So somewhere along the line, we have a public perception problem. And I hear you loud and clear that our end of the social contract needs to be upheld.
Thank you.
So I'd like to speak to that as
yes.
well. I think you're right. This seems really super obvious, and yet why haven't we done this before this meeting? So kudos to the Lindsay Institute for pulling us together for the first time and recognizing that need. And to your point, this wasn't, I got into this work to be a clinician, not to serve on the board, believe it or not. To get lost in the minutia of NRS and NAC was never a dream of mine. And when I have free time, I prefer not to think about these things. So it's just something that sort of came along, and I have an interest in making it better. So that's why I agreed to serve as the president of the board. To the point of trying to be more inclusive, I think the way things have been done in the past few years, you can never really plan on when a meeting might be held. It was almost as though they were decided in secret, and then at the last minute you'd find out about a meeting, and then your schedule was already set, so it was hard to attend. So what we're trying to do is set a very regular schedule. We're not there yet because it's a matter of calibrating all of the board members' schedules to the same, maybe third Friday of every month. So that way clinicians would know when the meetings are. They could plan it in their schedules. They wouldn't double book. And then also having conversations with the associations and with colleagues that, hey, part of what your professional responsibility is to be actively involved with the board. We can't do it without you. We are a better board if you are involved versus being kept out of the process.
Thank you. And so right before I pass it to my colleague, sorry, last thing, you made a comment about how the licensing fee hasn't changed for years. So mental health reimbursement rates haven't changed since the 80s. We didn't join this to be rich, and there are so many of us that are working without being paid to write grants, to treatment plans. So if we can advocate that much for our job and the people we serve, we would equally advocate for ourselves, given the opportunity, more than just public comment.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm David Robeck from Bridge Counseling here in Las Vegas. I hire a lot of clinicians, addiction and mental health, so I've dealt with at least two of the boards here, a third just the other day. And I want to say some positive things first, because you're allowed that. I will tell you that license verification on your website for LIDCs is awesome. It is something that I can go through and look at and know who's a supervisor, so I can steal them from that other agency.
5 years.
So that's a real advantage. The fact that you can pay with a debit card to get the licensing process started is also awesome. The challenge, though, that I have there is that your staff, and I understand there's a funding issue, they don't understand the law, and you have to debate the law, end up in the Attorney General's office to get something taken care of that should be a simple fix. And then there's also delays. Deal with the CPC MFT board. If anybody has ever visited the office, you know what a disaster that is. There are piles and piles and piles of papers, and that's after they're on there. I think their third executive director now in the last 6 months. I may be understating that. I'm not even sure. I know you're trying to do your best, and I know these are volunteer boards, so the boards really can't be expected to do some of the things that were discussed here a minute ago, but some things can be simplified. I contacted the social work board the other day and just asked for, what are the requirements to become a certified site? Well, we need to talk about this for a while. I mean, it was not a pleasant conversation, to be honest with you. And I asked for the application. She said, well, we have to mail it to you. I said, how about scanning it and sending it to me? No, it's got to be mailed to you. How about a fax? No, it's got to be mailed to you. It was one paper. It was one piece of paper. And we're actually one of the oldest agencies in Southern Nevada of providing behavioral health. I mean, should be something like thrilling. We have an opportunity to have a new place to put social work trainees, or practicum site. I do it with the CPCs and the MFTs all day long with 3 universities, but still working on the social workers. So those are some of a little bit positive, a little bit negative. But I think what you can steal from the LADC board is they have things online. You can print them off. You can get them. No, you had enough, darling. You're a competitor here. So let's put you in your place. Those are some really good things. I do value the depth of the boards and the other boards of their expertise and their evaluation of things. I will say one of the frustrating things is people coming from out of state and not understanding the requirements, putting the whole proposal through and then having academic review, only to find out that the pieces that are in the NRS don't describe the classes they took in California. But they probably do if you had the syllabus there. So I tell all of my people, get your syllabus for every class you've ever taken and jam it down their throats. I'm sorry, present it to them politely. Anyway, so that's just some of the feedback that I have for you. I'm not terribly supportive of combining the boards. I think there's too many differences between them, but I think you could learn a lot from bringing it at least to the 20th century, if not the 21st. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Heidi, we're going to get the response, but there's a young lady that's had her hand up from the beginning on the end.
I was just going to say very quickly, I don't think any of us take this criticism personally. If I'm sitting in your seat, I have similar frustration. So I appreciate you guys for keeping it real, reminding us that we still have work to do, and thank you for providing the feedback.
Okay, just a couple more questions because we want to keep honest to our time. Yeah, this side. Okay, we'll come to this side, but in the corner over here. Okay.
Everybody's just gonna have to write their evaluations fast.
Hi. So I'm Maddie. I'm an MSW from Simmons College. I saw that you have limitations in your board. I was wondering, do you think it's part of because we don't have a lot of support in lobbying in Congress, like other, let's say school medicine, they have a very strong, foundations where they have lobbies in Congress for policy, for advocating. And one of the class that I took during my MSW program is policy and advocacy. And right now we don't have a lot of social worker going to politics, to actually work in that field, to actually promoting and advocating for our field and actually create something that's supporting us so we can overcome these barriers for you guys, as well as making you guys, have a lot more funding and power in helping us.
Okay. So Yeah, I think a lot of the social workers do end up just going into or go, I guess the preference is just to go to the more clinical direction. In fact, we do have that advanced level called LISW, Licensed Independent Social Worker. And it seems nationwide that's just becoming thinner and thinner. It's a whole different track. It's about administration and policy and taking a whole different examination to be able to do that. And I still encourage folks because clinical work isn't for everybody, and you'd like to see that track still be kept viable. So we're working with ASWB to hopefully keep that examination, alive and going. I know that this year will be the first year our board has ever worked with a lobbyist, and it's not only because we think we're going to get our way. I mean, it's not. It's not about getting our way. It's not about. I think it's just that our information needs to be provided more directly and more from our perspective, and perhaps more with a little bit more. I'm going to use the word honesty, at least from our perspective and point of view, because I think lawmakers. When I first started this job, I thought all of the lawmakers were just really informed about the committees they sat on, and they knew everything, and they know a lot. They're very professional people. They're very smart individuals. But I tell you what, if you ever have gone through a legislative session, which I do, and it wears me down every single year, they just get bombarded with so much stuff that they need to read and understand and make votes on, that it's very easy to understand why they would defer very quickly to an expert. That's someone that has their ear, or somebody that they trust. And so, I just want to present a more balanced perspective this year during the legislative session. And in regards to, I probably was Monette that had you, who's our staff member who's been there the longest, and she's wonderful. I tell you what, sometimes I think, when you run an office, you need to kind of pick and choose your battles a little bit. We are working towards getting online. We are working towards email. And I tell you what, it may, and I don't want to lose staff doing that. I mean, I really mean that, because sometimes you have to be very careful and pick and choose your battles. So hopefully we'll get more things online as we go along. We have a budget set aside for that, and so we're working towards that.
Okay,
Thank you.
We're going to turn to this side of the room. We've been ignoring this side of the room. We have a couple questions over here. Okay.
Hi. Jim Oste, Southern Nevada Health District. This morning, Dr. Beck presented one slide that was very interesting to us. It was the abysmal ranking of the state with number of professionals by profession. And as I was looking down on it, I was seeing 50, 51st, 42nd, 8th. And it was like it was an outlier, or so that was marriage and family therapists were 8th in the country in number of marriage and family therapists per capita. Maybe there's something there that we need to look at. If that's happening, could we emulate that with some of the other professions here in our state? So the first question, part A, is why is it 8th? And part B is, if there's some solutions there, can we use those with other professions?
So I may be able to address that first part of that. The MFTs organized really early here in the state of Nevada in the 1970s. And so they really had an interest in providing those services here in Nevada, and consequently their profession really grew here in Nevada, as well as California. Over half of the MFTs nationally are in California. So California and Nevada are very strong in having an MFT presence. And your question also gives me a chance to tell you how many MFTs have been licensed. I asked our executive director a couple of weeks ago to give me these numbers. The total number of fully licensed MFTs that we've had historically, over 1,000, of which we still have about 800. The total number of fully licensed CPCs historically, 150, of which we have 121. And then we have about 500 or so MFT interns. We have about 200 or so CPC interns, so that exceeds the number of currently fully licensed MFTs and CPCs that we have. And in terms of the supervisors to provide that supervision to them, we have 172 primary supervisors total. So that's a little bit of the scope of our universe, if you will.
Very good. Okay, Efren, there was another person. I forget where. Okay, we'll come back down to you. Okay.
I'm Lynn Smith, and I transferred here from another state with 2 valid licenses. So what about reciprocity?
How long did it take you?
Our board is working, has been working on the reciprocity issue for the last several years because it is a difficult situation, and of course that takes some changes in the NEC and the NRS and for requirements and so on and so forth. One of the big issues that's hindering the reciprocity discussion is the state of California. Oh, I'm here. The state of California still licenses substance abuse counselors with a high school diploma. And so we are a little concerned because we have worked very, very hard to raise the bar because we need to, because of what's at stake. And so if we offer reciprocity, you have to offer reciprocity. And so that's what's hindering our mission. So we're looking at national standards, national testing, and those types of things, and we're bringing that in. And so the states that are utilizing that, then absolutely they'll have reciprocity, or they may have less hours required here in the state of Nevada or whatever. But honestly, the state of California is really hindering that for our licensees. Yours obviously are required to have the level of education where they can become licensed clinicians. But the substance abuse board, the substance abuse counselors have not always had that level, and so we're kind of fighting that battle is, do we now open up the gates and then we go back to where we were years ago? So
I think as far as with social work, one of my other functions, and the board is very supportive of my attending the ASWB, which is the Association for Social Work Boards. It's a North American regulatory social work component of boards from Canada and the United States. We have what's called, for the administrators, an administrators listserv, which we call the administrators forum, which we bring forth a lot of issues via email and post questions to get responses not only from our colleagues, like I said, in the United States, but from Canada as well. And I've had the honor of being nominated to go ahead and chair that committee. Got that because nobody else volunteered, and so I got it by default. But it's been quite interesting, and the biggest thing right now is licensure mobility. And so we're moving towards doing that. I think our board is recognizing the need to do that, recognizing the need to fill the void. And I think the biggest hitch for us is not necessarily the LSWs, but has been more of the LCSWs, because supervision is so different. Some can do it in a child protective services setting with very little psychotherapy, and then, ours is our board and our state has really been very, very focused on psychotherapy. But the language is beginning to change around that, and just kind of realizing that maybe we need to take a look at what LCSWs actually do. Do they actually do, the psychotherapy like with the Woody Allen, you sit there and, insurance companies don't even really reimburse for that anymore. Most of us are kind of doing things as solution focused. It's DBT. It's very fast moving, fast paced. You're lucky to get maybe 5 or 6 really good sessions. And then you may discharge to somebody at a community clinic who does maybe a little bit more long term. So as far as reciprocity for LCSWs, we are looking at that. And I think at some point in time, it may be something where maybe we might put psychotherapy in a whole different arena and just look at what clinical social workers do. But one of the things I wanted to dovetail with what Dr. Huey was saying earlier today was about just I'm hearing a lot about recruitment, but I'm not hearing a lot about retention of employees, which is very, very critical. And I wanted to point out that as we become more mobile in our society, as far as licensure, that's great for us. We can bring people in, but unless we have the employers that support employees and employment and appreciate them and give them safe and fostering types of environments, our state's not going to be only competing within our state. We're going to be competing with places in Washington, California, Arizona. Things are going to become a lot easier for folks to also transfer if that's where their desire is. So one of the things I would like to propose, and part of the behavioral health pipeline for the state is I've asked, do we have any exit interviews? Because I get to see the number of licensees every month that do not renew. And in August, there were 26. Now, if you figure that we have about 200 for about every birth month, so we, have about 2,400 licensees. 26 is very significant. Where did they go? How come they left? Are they coming back? Those types of things. I would like to see exit interviews, but not conducted necessarily by a state agency, because I think a certain amount of anonymity would be helpful. I think we could get somebody with a Survey Monkey or something with some sort of incentive to respond back. But I would like to see either funding from the legislature or something to do that during the next session to find out when people leave the state, why, and what are the demographics.
Great idea. And we're going to have, this is going to have to be our last question. Dr. Yao's had his hand up for a while. Sorry, you guys, we're right at time.
Just real quick, I've heard a lot of talk about transparency, and I think one comment and one question is I think we have to take it upon ourselves. I'm a licensed psychologist. As clinicians, we have to be present at the licensing boards. If we have issues with the boards, we have to take initiative to be there, communicate directly with our boards, and we have to be responsible for that, taking initiative. But in terms of transparency, I was under the assumption that all the licensing boards had to adhere to Nevada open meeting law. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes.
If that is, then everything is transparent. Postings, public postings, meeting minutes are posted, available to the entire public. Right. So if that's the standard, then that information is out there for us as clinicians.
And maybe it's on us to do a better job of educating. I'd like to go to our training programs and meet with students as they're graduating and interns and postdocs to explain exactly how boards work, because it's not something that's covered necessarily in our courses. So I have a little dog and pony show that I have put together, and I'd be happy to come out if you'd like me to do my dog and pony show, but I'd like to make that something that's a tradition of our board. I want to answer the reciprocity question for psychology and then make an observation. So psychology, if you're licensed in another state, you can get granted temporary licensure in Nevada pretty readily, and you just have to then sit for the state exam before you're full-fledged licensed in Nevada. We also accept the CPQ, which is the Certified Professional Qualifications, I think. The alphabets. You're like, what is CPQ? There must be like certified professional. That sounds good. It's a CPQ. It is offered by our state association, our Association of State and Provincial Psychology Boards. So the National Board of the Boards offers a CPQ, and if you have been licensed for 5 years without complaint and you have the proper accredited training and so forth, you can get granted the CPQ, and anybody who has that can get licensed in our state. Again, you still have to take the state exam in order for us to know that you know our state laws. So we have those mechanisms in place to assist with mobility. We're working on it all the time, and that's a theme that I just heard across the 4 groups. Licensure mobility is not a Nevada problem, it's a national problem. And if I think about it, mental and behavioral health care as a profession is really relatively young. And so we don't have the definitions in place. Our education and training standards are still taking shape at different stages, depending on whether it's a substance abuse counselor or a psychologist. But at our national levels, we're all working on making sure that the public knows the importance of mental and behavioral health care and what it is we exactly do. We really don't have couches in our offices anymore, right? And we really aren't shrinking heads anymore. We actually have incredible expertise, and we have to learn how to advocate for ourselves as professions so that the rest of the world knows. For the most part, medicine is an older profession. It's been around a lot longer. People have a general know more about what medicine's training looks like. You would never have a physician who didn't come from an unaccredited program get licensed. It wouldn't happen. And yet, in our fields thus far, accreditation is still taking shape and being recognized as the gold standard and the only acceptable standard. So I think some of what you guys are experiencing and what we're experiencing is represents where mental and behavioral health has been and how it's evolving, hopefully for the better, in terms of having less stigma, more stature, and I'll end on that note.
Okay. We could have a day long, I tell you, on licensing issues. That's our next topic. Sarah, you hear that? That's our next one. Day long just on licensing. But thank you all so much for sharing your insights. Okay, as we get ready to leave, just a couple more quick housekeeping items. And can I ask Dr. Sarah Hunt and Dr. Heidi Batiste to come forward? I want to make sure that the people who put this event on get proper credit, because a lot of us get to stand here the whole time when the work actually occurs by people that are behind the scenes. And so Dr. Sarah Hunt, that you've met already, and Dr. Heidi Batiste have been working on this event since last spring, and this is their work, you guys. So please thank them. And I just want to mention, too, a lot of our planning committee members have left, but also part of the vision for today, a thank you to Vance Farrell, Laura Hell, Tracy Green, Laura Cully, Michelle Paul, Brad Donahue, Amber Donnelly, Richard Yao, Maureen Rubin. Thank you all so much. And of course, our wonderful student volunteers that are all around the room, that with the new word, Sarah says they're voluntold, but they always say yes, and they help us so much. So thank you so much to our students as well. We appreciate your Friday, giving up the time. What we would like to do now, you're going to receive a couple communications from us. So this isn't over. So you know that there's a catch to it, right? So you probably have already received electronically an evaluation. We want you to fill out that evaluation. Heidi sent that out to you. But in addition to just how you felt about the event, we're asking people to sign up to take committee positions, because what we're hoping to do from this day, because a lot of times we get together and there's a lot of good energy, but then the momentum dies, and we don't want that to be one of these events. And so what we're hoping to do in that evaluation that you're going to receive, we're going to ask about your level of interest in staying with us. We're hoping to reach out and have a planner, a full-time strategic planner that's going to help us put forth a comprehensive document that takes in perspective all of these workforce issues, and be able to consolidate that with some of the other groups that are working on these issues too that could not be here. So when you receive that evaluation, please volunteer to be a part of those committees, to be a part of the work group that's going to work towards this comprehensive workforce document that we hope to present and before our legislative body and other decision makers as well. Last point, CEUs, they're going to be mailed to you. The certificates will be emailed to you guys in a couple of weeks. We're waiting on final certification from some of our boards, but they will. but they will be emailed out to you. But thank you all so much for helping with the event and taking part today. Mm-hmm. On the tablet? Okay. And we have a couple evaluations on tablets if you want to do them here today. We have some out in the lobby. Okay.